Alright, hello again to anyone watching these Kaijudo videos. Today, back with another deck profile, and this one is another deck that incredibly bad or experimental, whatever maybe you want to use kind terminology towards it. This is another build that definitely on the not on the cutting edge of things, that's for sure. A little bit speculative in a lot of different ways, but I figured I'd show it off because I talked in the Eye of the Storm set review about the potential I saw in card like Master of the Graves and Phantom Necromancer, so I wanted to kind of make those additions to Mono Dark and see how it is. So I haven't played a game with this deck, but I have tested a fair amount with with Mono Dark in the past, just without Master of the Graves and Phantom Necromancer, but a very similar overall list. So I figured I'd show this off. So I can just break down the cards in order. So we have 9 1-drops. We have Forsaken Puppet, which is very strong on turn 1. Can be a little bit awkward in the later turns. Doesn't really pair well even with the evolutions, but it's just a 1-drop that can attack, so it's going to be really strong turn 1 play. Gigabolver and Marrow Ooze. They're obviously 1-drops with downsides, but you have cards like Scavenging Chimera to make up for that. On top of that, you can just reuse, or you can use the bodies for your evolutions, or at the very least, you can just draw into them to kind of create these pseudo-fast attacks with the 3-mana evolutions. So, not the best thing, and these cards are kind of weak, and that's why this deck overall is kind of weak. Yeah, just all the 1-drops are pretty nice. I mean, you can even trade off Gigabolver with something else. So, not the worst cards. Marrow Ooze of blocker can come up in racing situations, so they have some versatility. Time Lost Phantom, I think, is one of the big cards. One of the cards this deck is built around, and just a really powerful addition to the Mono Dark archetype. So basically, you can just it almost functions as like a 2-mana Aqua Seneschal for this deck. And of course, like if you're playing an aggressive matchup, you don't really have to cast it. You have enough other cheap stuff, so you're not like forced to cast this by any means. But against like any kind of control deck, again, it's just like a 2-mana Seneschal, and anytime you hit a Shield Blast, it's just actually kind of absurd because like imagine like a Seneschal that just like randomly just generates like 4 mana or something. Like if you average maybe, well, I haven't done any math on this deck, but like you have, what is this, like 10 Shield Blasts in the deck, so not a ton, but like you're gonna have at least like one, like an average of like 1 or 1 point whatever over a game, and like the average cost of these cards, like you factor that in, and then you start to like calculate that maybe like this Time Lost Phantom is like drawing you a card and like generating you like 1 point whatever mana per attack, and that's like a busted card, right? So yeah, just I think there's tons of potential here in Time Lost Phantom, and definitely a card that warrants a little more exploration in the game of Kaijudo as a whole. But not sure if this is the best shell for it, but there's definitely a bunch of card choices in here to make use of it. I think I've definitely played more Shield Blast in the past, but I think part of them, or some of them got removed to make space for the Master of the Graves. Because I believe before, like I was playing, I think Lethal Lockbox over Necromancer, and then I had more Return from the Beyonds and maybe like an extra Shield Blast creature or something like that, or maybe a Terror Pit to round the deck out, but I cut those for this build. So I mean, you don't have to play into like the kind of inconsistent, clunky giant Shield Blast. Like even if this is just break one of your own shields, basically draw a card, like it's still just an incredibly powerful card, but having a few extra Shield Blasts goes a long way to just making it even more busted. So Scavenging Chimera, also just a really nice card, 2 mana, 3,000 power, buys you back creatures that have traded off or just gone to the graveyard, like Gigabolver. Like those have been just nice setups from the get-go, turning this into like another Seneschal. Like the 2-drop slot here, like as much as like the 1-drop slot is super weak, the Evos are terrible. Mono Dark has a lot going wrong for it. The one difference in the saving grace of like this Mono Dark deck is the 2-drops are just so much stronger. Like they have so much more going on than like the average like the average like mono light deck, where its 2-drops are basically just kind of glorified vanillas, or like mono fire. There's some decent cards in the late game, but or like from what's his name, I forget his name, but the maybe yeah, the 2 mana 1,000 that gets fast attack when you have another fast attack. Like that's a nice effect of 2 drop in the late game, but like when you're talking on curve, there's just not a lot going on. Whereas Time Loss and Scavenging Chimera are just like a cut above of what a lot of the other decks, rush decks, are doing. So that's like the saving grace of this whole archetype is probably these 2 cards. Baleful Drummer, a nice one as well. Not really sure if this is going to make the final cut. You can dump cards in your graveyard, which is kind of medium. So you can enable Master of the Graves kind of on curve, like on turn 3. You can attack, discard something. But for the most part, like you're just, when you run out of hand, I mean, it works a little counterproductive because like you want to run out of hand, so you just have this 2 mana 4K, which is the appeal to the card. Part of the reason I like it is just something I've talked about before, is just like having big creatures mitigates the impact of Shield Blast creatures. On top of that, just 4K getting through Lemon and trading with Strider is just really important. So I like the stat line. And on top of that, I mean, you can sequence things too, where you'd like attack with the Drummer, discard your creature, and then you can get it back with Chimera after attacking. So like there are sequences around it, but for the most part, like maybe it's too big a downside when you're trying to hold on to an evolution creature, so you can bring it into, so you can like draw into that 1-drop to play it in the same turn or something like that. Like you can kind of compromise that by having Baleful Drummer. So there might be a little bit too much dyssynergy with the deck, a little bit too much of a drawback going on. But there have been a lot of games like when I was playing the deck before that I felt like the card was held its own. Like it felt strong enough to play. But yeah, maybe a different card like Lurking Skullcutter could come in over this, or some other 2-drop. Not too sure. But yeah. The next card here, Vicious Coffer, I think I cut Locomotivator for this. Locomotivator was another card that I felt like just didn't really fit well with the deck. I mean, having a 3-mana draw card again was really nice, but it definitely kind of conflicts with the Shield Blast Time Lost Phantom package. Just because like when you're part of the reason you want to play all these Shield Blasts is so that you can have a bunch of Shield Blasts. But if you just reduce the number of shields you have per game because you're playing Locomotivator in your deck, it kind of runs like counter to that whole plan. And on top of that, it definitely was kind of a poor sequence with Baleful Drummer, where you would play Drummer on turn 2, and then on turn 3, maybe like normally you would just dump the rest of your hand out by going like 2-drop, 1-drop, or maybe you would just like make a 3-drop and consign something else to being discarded. But now, like you draw, or sorry, there was just a lot of spots like you top deck Locomotivator, and then you get that extra card in hand for next turn, but now you can't attack with the Baleful Drummer, like spots like that. And again, when you empty your hand and it like Locomotivator, like any spot where it's the last card in your hand, like it just felt like there was a little bit of anti-synergy with both the Baleful Drummer and like the whole Time Lost Phantom thing going on. So I ended up cutting that, and Vicious Coffer makes a lot more sense. Like it fills your graveyard, so you can get back stuff with Scavenging Chimera, and of course the big thing is just enabling Master of the Graves, just on curve, really powerful for that. So main reason to do that whole thing. Attic Reaper here and Shapeshifter, definitely underwhelming cards. But part of the reason is like I've just felt like, I mean, the cards suck, I'm not going to lie. Like they're not very good. But I mean, 5k evolution out of Shapeshifter can be nice because it can attack through Lemon and Strider and stuff like that. It lets you evolve creatures to give you a little bit more of an effective threat. It comes back to your hand so you can keep spamming it as like a fast attack. And that's really where these cards are meant to be, is just they give you the option to have fast attacks in the deck. Like a lot of the time, Attic Reaper is going right into your mana zone, which can be a downside because you're already playing so many clunky cards. Like you're playing, I mean, this list is a little more refined than previous versions I was playing because a lot of those like extra clunky Shield Blasts have been replaced. But when you're drawing a bunch of dead cards like Necromancer and Joko in the early game, drawing more dead cards with these bad evolutions is definitely not ideal if you want to curve out. But at the same time, you already have so much redundancy. Like you already have 9 1s and 9 2s. Like that's probably enough. Like you don't really need more of them. So it's just nice to have like something that can be a fast attack, right? Like it's just nice to be like sitting on a creature in hand and then just like trying to top deck Attic Reaper for the win. Like you kind of need this little bit of extra reach. It's just unfortunate that it has to come from such a weak card overall. But even then, like Attic Reaper does have its applications. Like it can pick off birds, it can pick off like Evo bait. Like it still has effective purposes. Like one of the big cards it can trump too is like the darkness blockers, especially cards like Scared Orbital of Gloomhollow, even Grudge Weaver. Like Attic Reaper can kind of just come down and just invalidate those cards, which gives you a little bit of play against blockers. Now, not very good against Strider in particular. I mean, you can get an attack through, but then they can trade off, and like you're still like 2-for-1ing yourself and 3-for-1ing yourself because you're giving them a shield. Although, I mean, the more important thing, it's not you're not really concerned about how many cards they have, but the fact that they can answer two of their cards with, or two of your cards so easily is like more the problem. Is like they can answer like Attic Reaper plus the bait with only 2 mana out of an Aqua Strider. Because again, when you're Rush, you don't really care about the card advantage, but just the fact that like 2 cards is so easily answered by such a cheap card is just, that's where the problem is. So yeah, cards kind of medium. Maybe a little bit hypocritical of me just because, I mean, I'm someone who has kind of crapped on Shaman of the Vigil, doesn't really think that card's playable by my own words, but here I am playing these cards. So maybe that's a little bit of a hypocritical move by myself, but I mean, at the same time, like this is Mono Dark and Shaman of the Vigil is competing in Nature Light, which is the 2 best civilizations in the game. So definitely something there. I mean, Mono Dark, you just don't really have the options, and it feels like these are cards you're kind of maybe not forced to play, but I feel like you do kind of need what these cards are offering. But they are just not good cards. They're bad, but they're kind of like they do the best for what I think you need something to do, or you need like this purpose fulfilled. Master of the Graves, hopefully this adds a little more power to the deck. Like it gives you a 4-drop you can play. Kind of awkward with Baleful Drummer because like you can't, like you want to hold on to this, but like maybe you have to discard it to the drummer. Like I don't know. Like yeah, it's kind of awkward. Like, but at the same time, like if you're going second, you don't run out of cards so often, and then Master of the Graves is better with drummer. But I mean, all these sequences you don't have to play drummer on turn 2, I guess. But Master of the Graves is just totally fine. Hopefully, it's like it adds the power that the deck is missing, like this non-bone bladesable, like giant 6k double breaker. Slow card, it's not fast at all. Like it doesn't attack till turn 5, but it just gives you something a little more robust to break through blockers and stuff like that. Again, part of the reason I wanted to build this approach is it feels like it pairs well with all these Marrow Oozes and Gigavolvers and Vicious Coffer especially, and like Attic Reaper just comes down, unleashes, and then you fill your grave that way. Like there's just things you can do. Necromancer, another card I really liked, where you're breaking it. If you break it off Timeless Phantom, it's awesome because you can buy back a creature from your yard, and then on top of that, go wide with a body. I just felt like it was pretty good. Before I was playing like something like Lethal Lockbox, which is a nice card as well, but it felt like just that extra card could be really nice to set up plays. Maybe a little awkward with Master just because it pulls the creatures out, but like hopefully you have enough creatures in your graveyard most of the time. Like you're not always going to be scavenging, chimmering everything back and then playing this and getting everything back. Like especially if you draw a Vicious Coffer, you should have enough stuff going on into your graveyard. Joko is just a great card. Like it has the duality of being that like Terror Pit kind of effect that you get out of your shields with Time Lost Phantom. Like you can just get it out, blow up a blocker that maybe you just like chumped attacked into, or like maybe blow up something like a Gloomhollow or something like a Sword Horn that could revenge kill. Like those can be really powerful sequences. But then also just having like a creature, like again, just going wide is just super important, and just like dumping out these creatures that don't die to Tendril Grasp and don't don't die to bone blades and all this early removal kind of stuff, level based removal, like it's just nice to go wide with those creatures. And bone blades is just really important because this deck just struggles to answer cheap blockers. You don't have Comet Missile, Ashen Tribute as like efficient answers. So Bone Blades is a nice card for that. And then Return from Beyond was the last card. Again, like when I was just throwing this deck together, I had 3 initially, and it wasn't a card I was super enthusiastic about. It was kind of just another way of playing like a Shield Blast creature, but rather than it being just like one of these completely dead draw, like 8 mana or 6 mana cards, it was like a 4 mana card that's still castable, right? Like you could just draw it, cast it, and even if you bring back like a sucky 2-drop or 1-drop, like it's still a creature you can cast. So I felt like it was a nice extra Shield Blast to play, but I cut back on that to make room for these Master of the Graves. On top of that, like I mean, it makes sense too. Like Master wants cards in your graveyard, Return takes them out of your graveyard, but I just left it in. Maybe this could be like a Terra Pit or some other 2-drop or something else. I don't know exactly, but yeah. So overall, I guess if I summarize it, like it's overall not a good deck. There's some things that need to be worked out. Whether or not you want to go super hard on the Shield Blast theme with Time Lost Phantom, maybe you don't have to. Whether or not you want Baleful Drummer in the final cut of the list, maybe there's not enough going for it. Like I love the power of it mainly, but the discard effect is a lot more of a drawback than it is a benefit because you're not playing stuff to really abuse that. I mean, unlocking Master of the Graves is reasonable, but that's not really a huge advantage. For the most part, it's just like a super big downside and has a little bit of counterplay with some of the other stuff going on with Time Lost Phantom, drawing extra cards, and Scavenging Chimera trying to draw you extra cards. Like part of the strength in general is just like, again, these super powerful 2-drops that draw you extra resources, and Baleful Drummer might be a little bit too much counteracting that own game plan. So we'll see where I land on that. I'm not sure, but overall, I've kind of enjoyed the card. Then you have like the mill package, as I mentioned, the evolution creatures that suck, but I feel like they add like that extra little bit of reach that you kind of need to, like you just need to be top decking some fast attacks in a lot of spots. So I don't know. Overall, a lot that needs to be figured out, I guess, but I think it's a decent deck. It kind of does some cool stuff. Is pretty like unique to Darkness for sure. Not going to be like anywhere near as like effective and consistent as like the traditional fire-based rush decks in my opinion, but does yeah, like it does a good job playing to kind of what Darkness wants to do and has a lot more trickiness going on, a lot more like synergies going on. But yeah, as always, let me know if there are any critiques you have on the deck, any easy improvements you would like to make, or just, I guess, general feedback on the deck itself. Let me know of any other decks you might want to see in the future, any other video topics you might want discussed. But other than that, as always, thank you for watching the video, and we will see you in the next one. Bye.